This is the atomic symbols quiz. To pass this quiz, it's the only quiz in the whole year where you've got to get 100% to pass it. All my other quizzes, it's 80. This one's 100. That's how important I think this one is. So before you get all worried about it, thinking it's super hard, look at this. This is just a graph of the last couple hundred kids who took the quiz. And look, pretty much everybody passes it. There's a couple kids who are still working on it. But out of the last couple hundred attempts, this is where you're going to end up. You are going to pass it. You just got to get ready for it. And it's not too hard. So what does an atomic symbol look like? Well, you're going to have a smaller number and a bigger number. And depending on the company that prints the periodic table, they might put the big number on top and the little number on bottom. It doesn't really matter. All you need to remember is that the little number is the protons. And we call that the atomic number. And the big number, let me erase this stuff here. The big number is called the atomic mass. So those two things, how do you get those things? Well, the atomic number, that's just the number of protons, and the mass is the protons plus the neutrons. So not too hard there. What's the deal? Why did I put these H's over on the right here? Well, I want you to know that every time you have a capital letter, that means you've got an element. But what if we, there's like 100 plus kinds of elements and there's only 20 some letters in our alphabet? That means we're going to have to reuse some letters. So there's like a good handful of elements that start with H. So what are we going to do? Well, for hydrogen, that's just element number 1. It's the simplest one. It gets H. But then helium, we had to throw on this little E here. And then for hafnium, we threw on this little F here. So that's just kind of a handy thing to remember. Each capital letter equals one element. I guess I could have done it with the C too, like Ca is calcium. Anyway, so that's some stuff about atomic symbols and periodic tables. Now let's move on. So in general, this is what we have. In an atomic symbol, you're going to have the letter or letters in the middle. Pretty easy. The atomic number is going to be on the bottom left, so that's the small number, the number of protons. The atomic mass is going to be on the top left. That's the protons plus the neutrons. And then the electric charge is going to be on the top right, if there is an electric charge, because not every atom has an electric charge. We'll get into ions more later. For now, let me just say that the electric charge is a comparison. It's the protons, which are positive, compared to the electrons, which are negative. Since electrons can come and go in an atom, sometimes you'll have more, sometimes you'll have less. And like I said, the ions quiz, that's coming at us down the road. So let's jump to a few problems and let's just see how easy or how hard they are to do. I made 3 and I think that'll probably be plenty for this video. So let's start with this one. Let's start with the one in the middle. Let's start with Cu. That's copper. And maybe you're wondering, why in the heck is copper Cu? Well, some of our elements were named a long time ago, like a couple thousand years ago. People who spoke and wrote Latin called it cuprum. So, and some of these elements were kind of stuck with these old symbols. So let's look at copper. We know that the atomic number is right here, and that's the number of protons. So that's 29. That's easy. The mass is the top left number right here. So that's easy. And the neutrons, since the 29 is the protons and the 64 is the protons plus the neutrons, the periodic table doesn't, or the symbol doesn't tell us what the neutron is, but it's very easy for us to figure it out. All we have to do is go, okay, if the mass is the protons plus the neutrons, then the neutrons equals the mass minus the protons. So we've just got to go 64 minus 29. And in this case, it's going to be 35. Electric charge, I didn't put a number up here. There is no electric charge. So our electric charge for this atom is just 0. And when that happens, remember, it's a comparison of the pluses versus the minuses. So if there's no electric charge, that means our protons equals our electrons, so that's just 29. 1 down, 2 to go. Maybe we should pause the video while you try calcium. Okay, so here we go. Protons is going to be 20. The mass is going to be 40. 40 minus 20 is 20, so we've got 20 protons and 20 neutrons. Electric charge, we've got plus 2. So how do we figure out the number of electrons? Remember, we said the electrons was a comparison of the pluses versus the minuses, the protons versus the electrons. So we can figure that out, and here's how I do it. I know I've got 20 pluses, and I know I've got 2 more pluses than minuses. So if I've got 20 pluses and 2 more pluses than minuses, that means I must have only 18 minuses. This is a positive ion. So if I wanted to, I could draw all this out. I could draw 20 pluses, and I could draw out 18 minuses, and I could say, all right, so if I've got 20 of these versus 18 of these, 20 pluses versus 18 minuses, that comes together to make a plus 2 charge. So no, I'm not going to draw all this out for every one on the quiz, but that's just kind of how I think about it. One trick that students use that I don't really like very much, because I'm not sure if they understand what the atom is like, but one trick that students will often do is they'll just take this number and they will subtract that number. And that's it. So let's pause the video again and do iodine here. All right, so protons is just 53. Mass is 127. Neutrons is 127 minus 53, and that's 74. I confess, I did use my calculator for that. Electric charge here, that just tells us it's a -1. So since we've got a -1 electric charge, that means we've got one more negative than plus. So if we've got 53 pluses and we've got one more negative than plus, we must have 54 electrons, 54 negatives. So does the rule, or does the trick, if you take this and subtract this, does that work here? 53 minus -1? Yeah, that does work. So there you go. I'm coming in at under 8 minutes, and hopefully this video gets you ready for the atomic symbols quiz.